Sivaraman to talk about frugal innovations for the developing world, how to initiate and how to proceed. So when we see all this, wow, we think, wow, these are people who are super people, but how can ordinary person, develop that mindset and, start the journey? Anand.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shubhadra Jalali. Thank you so much, Dr. Sunny Sengupta. I guess following Dr. Kakadia, we will be sharing with you a little bit of what we have done. There is, just so that I can be open, there's financial interest in terms of me being the CEO and co-founder of Remedio. What we've been looking at is, as someone who's been in the US and I was working on innovations in the US, what we've been able to see and what I've been personally very thrilled about is really the opportunity to innovate in India in ways that you cannot actually do in the West. And that has to do as a result of both the clinical cohorts in India as well as clinicians in India who are extremely open to dialogue to innovate. And that's a very critical part in which traditional innovation has been, where it's a top-down approach, where you would have something that's designed in the West that then comes to settings which are infrastructure poor, and there is a trickle-down effect. So what we've been able to look at in terms of the past few years is, rather than these force-fit solutions, are there ways by which one can think in terms of simple products that are designed as a result of using the constraints in a developing nation context, such as, let's say, there being lack of access to electricity infrastructure or awareness or skilled manpower, as an opportunity to innovate. It's what we call contextual design or universal design, which then results in products that are so simple that they are actually innovative in their own way and have a global appeal. So just to give you some sense in terms of the first part, which is I think what Dr. Sani wanted me to focus on, which is we use what's called design thinking sprints, which is a way by which you can go from product definition to the final POC validation and then taking it through initial design. So we do a lot of what we call emotive data. So for example, we go observe, and we actually have students from design institutes where there's a cross-functional team that only observes and sees what exactly is being done and where the area of innovation is. And usually when a clinician speaks to us about changes that they would like or something new that they would like to do, we typically observe. So that's the emotive data. And what happens post that is, of course, when we go through the intellectual property to design and the engineering and validation, which eventually leads to the market realization. I would be talking only on the first part because the rest of the speakers will be speaking on the parts on the patent and the commercialization aspects. So just to take you through some examples, this was something that we worked with a non-ophthalmology example, but where we worked with the government of Chhattisgarh, where the idea was for a very simple reason, a simple device for neoliterate health workers to screen for lower respiratory tract infections. So what they would do is just simple counting of breaths, but what we used is get the inputs, worked with them on an iterative basis to come up with certain designs. And this is something that I feel personally a lot about. I feel even those who may be looking at extremely affordable innovations, there's no reason why the device cannot look like something that's designed to have the same feel as what you would with an Apple device. So the idea is always to bring in design and create a center of excellence around design. So what this was a way by which we worked with the health workers within 6 to 8 months, by which they were now able to count breaths and be able to screen for lower RTI pretty easily. Next version of this device is where we've converted it into a pendant that the child, the infant, wears with automatically alarms and beeps when there is a significant increase in the breath count rates. The second was, this was one where in the previous company where we had a problem where CD4 reagents were extremely expensive, 1,000 plus rupees in terms of the cost of a test. And we had brought down the price from 1,000 to around 100 rupees per test. But the key is not in terms of reducing the cost of the reagents themselves, but we were able to do it in a manner where they needed no cold chain, meaning no refrigeration. So I guess the greatest validation is one, of course, when you get the FDA approvals in place, and more importantly, the competitor, in this case, BD Biosciences, then started buying the reagents from us to start supplying globally. So the idea is, again, using the inputs where you can convert the inputs into needs as a result of bringing in clarity on where exactly the differentiation needs to be bought in, and then going through the same design sprint process as a means by which you can engineer, validate, and realize the innovation. The last one that I wanted to discuss about, which is more in the field of ophthalmology, is around 3 years back when we started having a significant number of our funders on phone devices, which is a non-mydriatic imaging system available globally. We worked with a number of artificial intelligence companies, including a group called INAC, Google, where one of the key reasons we realized is the ability to immediately give a report was not there, because the images had to be sent to the cloud and the processing would happen on the cloud and then come back again. So we used that as an opportunity to innovate, and we said, look, is there a way by which the entire AI algorithm can be run on the phone itself? And we had to take into account certain constraints, and this is something that I believe is extremely important. We don't look at the constraints as something which is negative or constraining us in terms of not being able to come out with the product that we have, but use it as an opportunity to innovate. For example, in this case, we found that for mild NPDR, the kappa among ophthalmologists was actually was not very high, including the case where we would have medical retina and vitreoretinal specialists. So what we did was we trained the algorithm only on no DR to increase specificity of no DR, and RDR, or referable DR, to increase sensitivity of RDR. And the idea was, how do you still keep it at less than $1 or 50 rupees a report? And so what it resulted in is a patent that we got in terms of how you would do this on the phone itself, which we then clinically validated and brought to market. But again, the idea here is to say that there are certain things that I think we are able to do in India, primarily because we are in India. Because the constraints force you to think in terms of solutions that I believe is going to be difficult for either an academic institution or a company outside India to think the same way, primarily as a result of the fact that the constraints force you to innovate, and you do have clinical cohorts and clinicians who are really interested in being able to work with you as a population. I think that's extremely important. We'll leave you in the last slide in terms of key lessons learned. Time spent on articulating and validating the need to be addressed, I think, both from a technical and business perspective, is extremely critical. As I mentioned, defining the constraints of product use in India forces innovation. This is one thing that we've learned, especially when you go outside India in terms of selling the same product. We made the mistake of focusing too much on affordability and focusing too much on the fact that it's low cost. But I think it's really the fact that in addition to cost, if there is something else that you're doing new, I think that really has a global appeal. For example, we realized that the same product that we made in India, we reduced the weight of it and it sold significantly in the US, but it sold as a result of the fact that it's the only non-mydriatic device available on a smartphone. So I do believe that low cost is extremely important, and by doing it in India, it naturally will be low cost, but being able to have an additional feature that is new or novel, not available in any other product, is extremely critical. The second is patents and peer-reviewed publications in today's world is the currency for global product acceptance. I do know that we were struggling with sales outside India, but as soon as we started having a significant number of publications coming out, it changed significantly in terms of the acceptance of the product in the West as well. So to a certain extent, the currency is about peer-reviewed publications as well as patents. And finally, and this is what I'm extremely excited about every day in India, is the fact that it's possible to have a cross-functional team that's also made up of clinicians who are ready to take up the time to be able to work with a young group of engineers as well as product developers. And I think this is something that is possible, at least I can say, with having worked in the US and built some products there as well, is only possible in India because of the fact that we get access to clinicians much easily and actually involve them as part of the product development process. So these are some of the key lessons learned in going from need to the initial validation to bringing it to market. So I'll leave it with that. Happy to take any questions, but thank you so much.